Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon from all across the state. I'm Tom DeCaney. I'm the Executive Director of the California Alliance for Arts Education. I'm based at my home in San Francisco, although our offices are in Pasadena. And it's a great privilege to honor you all today and welcome you all today to our session on rural arts education strategies. We've got a great panel before you, and we're so happy to be partnering with our colleagues at the California County Superintendent's Arts Initiative. So I want to thank Sarah Anderberg and all of our great partners for working with us on this session. And it's something close to my heart growing up in rural Minnesota, and knowing that public education, particularly in this challenging moment, is really facing many challenges, but particularly in rural communities as we overcome the barriers to accessing technology. So I'm hopeful that we have some great expertise here today to be able to help us all navigate this really challenging moment. With that, I wanted to say a little bit about the Alliance. We are the statewide policy and advocacy organization challenging a high quality arts education for every California student. And we've worked in numerous communities across California for years. We're in our 5th decade. So we're thrilled to have you all here today. And I want to start us off by acknowledging the land that we occupy. And I'm asking if we have, perfect, look at that. We have a slide here to help us all better understand the land that we occupy. In San Francisco, I know that I'm on Ohlone Ramaytush land. And we want to recognize the colonial history in the United States and in California. And what I'd like to do is ask everybody to click on the link, or either click this link and enter it into your browser, or to text your zip code to the number located on the screen. And then in the chat, type in where you are and what the first people were on the land that you're occupying. And we do this just to better understand the history of the land, and as I mentioned, the colonial history in the United States, and to honor the first people that were here before us. So if everybody could take a moment and type in either to your browser or into your, to text the number there. And we encourage everybody to use this exercise in your own sessions. It's something that we learned through our partners at Race Forward. And we encourage everybody to use this to better understand the first people in California and honor the settler legacy of white supremacy in California. So please join us in doing that. And I'll give a moment for everybody to type in where they're located and the first people of the land that they occupy. I'll just give another minute here for everybody to plug into the chat. If you're just joining us, we are acknowledging the first people of the land that we are on, and we're asking everybody to use the browser here on the slide, or to text your zip code to the number on the screen, and to type into the chat the first peoples of the land that you're on today. Great. Thank you again, everybody, for acknowledging the first people in California, and to acknowledging the colonial history, and to settler mentality that we want to disrupt. And we, again, encourage everybody to use this in your work. We think it's been a great tool, and we want to, again, thank Race Forward for introducing this to us. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Adelaide, to introduce everybody today. And I'm going to go to my still shot so as to not disturb anyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. 2 quick notes. I want to welcome our graphic facilitator, Tracy. So you'll notice if skip over to her video, she will be graphically recording our session today, and we will be sure to send that out. So we'll revisit it at the end so we can see her final product. There she is saying hello to us. So we'll take a look at the product at the end, but we'll also send it out as a follow-up. I also want to say hello to our two interpreters who are joining us today. Kelly Wyatt and Alonzo Pack are both with us. So thank you both so much for being here. Well, fantastic. It is now my pleasure to hand things over to Sarah Anderberg, who will get things started.
Thank you, Tom and Adelaide. It's just a privilege to partner with the California Alliance on this webinar. I'm Sarah Anderberg. I represent the California County Superintendent's Educational Services Association and direct the CCSESA statewide arts initiative. We've been working to strengthen and expand arts learning in California public schools. One of the questions we continually ask is, how do we increase student access to arts learning in rural communities? And we've been at this for several years now and still have much to learn. Some of the work that we've done over the past several years, we really have been discussing with national, state, regional, county, and local leaders. And we've been learning a great deal about the barriers and the assets of rural communities. We hosted 2 statewide arts education think tanks with rural leaders from across the state. And we also did a lot of deep dive into the Arts Education Data Project. If you haven't gone to the Create California website, the Arts Education Data Project can give you a glimpse of the data that's in your school or district, at the county level and at the state level. And that really helps identify some of the gaps that exist in coursework for our students. We've done a lot of research, and through the Hewlett and Stewart Foundation, we've been able to offer grants for strategic planning and implementation. On our website, we have a suite of resources called Creativity at the Core, and we were really happy to support the development of Module 21. The Larry County Office of Education, under the leadership of Kate Stover. You'll hear a little bit more about this module in a few minutes, but we invite you to our website to take a look at the modules that exist there. We also have been spotlighting the work and some of the counties that have really been moving forward in arts education. And just recently, we launched a new rural arts network. We started this with county leaders, but the vision is to expand the audience as we evolve to include leaders from arts organizations and other interested parties. Our hope is to spotlight promising practices that build on the unique assets of our rural areas. We operate through a collective impact model. Most of you are familiar with that model, but CCSESA serves as the backbone, and we do have a common agenda with mutually reinforcing activities in hopes to make greater gains and make wide change in the state. One of the studies that we've found very helpful was sponsored by the National Endowment of the Arts. I encourage you to take a look. This was done by Dr. Lisa Donovan and Maren Brown, where they interviewed rural leaders from across the United States. And they identified some of the unique barriers and also some of the assets. One of the barriers, or some of the barriers that are listed here, are only partial. I know that if you live in a rural area, you could probably add many more things to the list, but lack of funding often comes up, along with recruitment and retaining of teachers and school administrators. Geographic distance is certainly a barrier, especially with connectivity and also with travel and weather. We know there's poverty and lack of economic opportunities, along with competing educational priorities and policies that oftentimes don't support the arts. We also know that it's important to harness unique assets in each rural area with the recognition that not all rural communities are the same. But some of the things that we have spotlighted are strong relationships and a strong sense of community. Incredible leaders. As I've traveled across the state, it's been amazing what these leaders are doing across the state. And there's a great pool of creative expertise and artistry, along with the unique and beautiful geographic features of rural communities. Also, we've seen a lot of innovation and adaptation, especially as counties mitigate many issues, including the pandemic and wildfires. We've had several game changers, and these are some of them. I really want to speak to arts education, strategic planning, because when stakeholders come together across sectors and agree on some key recommendations that will increase access for our kids, things happen. Also, if you haven't seen the Declaration of Rights of all students to equity in arts learning, this is a way to really create a resolution for your organization that points to the real impact for students. Professional learning, advocacy, garnering school board support is also very important. And we know that the Alliance work in Arts Now communities has really moved the pendulum forward. Also, we know that it's important to involve decision makers and garner their support, as well as cultivate partnerships. And I really believe that we have to work at all levels, national, state, regional, county, and local levels simultaneously in order to make change. I want to highlight that research can be a real catalyst. Oftentimes, even an environmental scan of what you do have and then what gaps exist can be a foundation for really building the work. And I have to underscore the importance of cross-sector dialogue, which can really open doors. And we do need to connect the dots with a common agenda. Some final thoughts, just as Pat Wayne from Create California often says, data can be our friend, and networks really are critical. I believe we have so much to learn from each other. Our unique perspectives and voices matter. It truly is about equity. And I invite you, if you want to learn more about our work, we just published this publication, Counties on the Move for Arts Education, that highlights some of the models and the work that's happening across the state. So with that, it's my pleasure now to turn it over to Kate Stover from Tulare County Office of Education. Kate, take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for that warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I would say it's nice to see you, but I can't actually see you, but I'm sure you're there. So it's lovely to have you here. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is rural, what makes rural, how do we become rural, what is rural? Oops, not that direction. So Sarah mentioned, and I just want to call it out again, Creativity at the Core Module 21, Creativity and Collaboration in Rural Communities. This was about a year in action trying to build this module and put this together and really get a lot of resources and ideas together to strengthen rural communities. So what I'm going to talk you through over the next little bit of time, all of the resources that I'll share with you are housed in this module. So just know that you have this to lean on and to come back to if you want more information about everything that I'm sharing. So just a quick little project for you right now. Grab a scratch piece of paper, something you can write on, and I want you to consider for yourself, how do you define rural? When I say the word rural, what do you think of? You might think of trees, cows, agriculture, not very many people, small communities. far from things. If you're Stacy, we will laugh about you being in Canada because you're so far. How do you define rural? Whatever picture is that you have in your head and whatever that definition is of rural that you have, I want you to hold on to that and think about that while I walk you through these next couple slides, because I think you might be surprised about what the definition of rural really is and what it really could be. So I'm going to tell you a little about myself. I'm from Tulare County, from the Tulare County Office of Ed, fourth generation Tulare County born and raised in the heart of the Central Valley, Southern Central Valley. This is where we are, just to put us on the map literally. Couple facts about my county. So we were incorporated in 1852. Our county is 4,839 square miles, which includes all of the land and all of the water. We have 460,000 plus residents, probably more than that now. And we have over 103,000 students. So with all of that data is our friend, right? With all of that data and all of those statistics, think for yourself for a second. Is Tulare County rural? We'll see. So when we think about rural, there's two definitions to consider. One comes to us from the US Census Bureau, which I hope you all took your census this year because it's really important. So the US Census Bureau gives us one definition. We'll talk about that. The second definition comes to us from the National Center for Education Statistics, which is part of the Institute of Education Sciences, which is part of the Department of Education. So one comes from the US government, just the census itself. One comes specifically from the Department of Education. We'll talk about the differences. So according to the census, what is rural? Well, the Census Bureau defines rural as any population, housing, or territory not in an urban area. Okay, but what is an urban area? Well, they define urban areas as two different types of geographies. So there's urbanized areas, which have a population of 50,000 or more. And then there's urban clusters, which have a population of at least 2,500 and less than 50,000. So a lot of words to basically say, the census defines a rural territory or a rural place as anything less with a population of less than 2,500, okay? So census less than 2,500 people, you're rural, according to the census. So some of you might have known that, some of you might be surprised by that fact. Did you know that 97% of the country is rural and over 60 million people, or 19.3% of the population in the United States, 1 out of 5 Americans lives in a rural area? Fun facts. And I'm sure these numbers, and just a caveat, all of these numbers come from the 2010 census. So obviously these will be updated pretty soon, but they still give us a picture. So here in California, what does this look like? Well, as you know, we have 58 counties. Our state represents 155,779 square miles, and we have 39.5 million people. And again, that number comes, it's an estimate from 2019. So it's probably a little more than that. But my question to you is, how rural is California? Now, we know there's really, really big cities, the Bay Area, Southern California, San Diego area, and we know there's really small cities, small communities, small, what we would think of potentially as rural areas. I want you to think about your county or the place where you live, the place where you work, the place where you spend the most time. How rural do you really think it is? Here's the map. So 57 of 58 counties in California have rural areas. 57 of 58 counties in California have rural areas, believe it or not. So what's the one county that doesn't have a rural area? Drop it in the chat if you think you know. You can read the tiny map, it's actually given to you, but we have at least one person on the call today, I think, that lives in this county, but yeah, I see answers coming in. Yeah, San Francisco. So San Francisco County is the one county in the state that doesn't have any rural areas. And obviously the city is the county. And so that is the most non-rural area of the state. The rest of the state, so wherever you are in the state, part of your county is, by the census definition, considered to be rural. That might be surprising to some of you. So now let's talk about school districts. So think about the school districts where you work, where you serve, where you're at. And this is a completely different way of looking at this. It's a different definition. It's a different context. So the National Center for Education Statistics uses 3 codes when they look at rural areas. And again, this is a little complicated, but rural fringe, which is the biggest rural area, is a territory that's less than or equal to 5 miles from an urbanized area, okay? So if they're within 5 miles of a bigger city, they're considered a fringe district, a rural fringe district. A rural distant district is more than 5 miles, but less than or equal to 25 miles from an urbanized area. It starts getting a little complicated. And a rural remote district is a territory that's more than 25 miles from an urban area and more than 10 miles from an urban cluster. So basically, if you think of it in a simple term, the census is about how many people there are. The NCES, or the education statistics in the school districts, it's about how far you are from a bigger city. Okay, so census, big people, number of people. The National Center for Education Statistics is how far you are from a bigger city. That's a very important distinction because it matters when you're thinking about rural and how we define rural. In case you're curious, rural isn't the only definition NCES has. They also have definitions for town, for suburb, and then the largest, of course, is a city. And the biggest is a large city. The smallest is a remote rural area. And again, all of these statistics and a walkthrough of how you can find this information for any district in the state is in the module. So if you want more information, go ahead and check that out. So all of that said, there are 348 rural school districts in California. Did you know that? You probably didn't. Maybe you did. My question to you is, in the chat, take a guess, which county has the most rural school districts? Take a guess. The most rural school districts. Let's see, San Bernardino, Butte, Shasta, Humboldt, Imperial, LA, Shasta, lots of really good guesses. Still coming in, I'll give you another minute. Put your guess in. Kern, lots of San Bernardino guesses. That's a good guess. Might be right, we'll see. 10 more seconds. Okay, so keep that district that you think is the most rural in your mind. Now, the next question is, which district do you think, or districts plural, have no, which counties have no rural districts at all? One of them, obvious, San Francisco, because there's no rural area. It's not a rural county. But which other districts, which other counties are not rural? I'll give you a hint. There's 6. And this one, I'm sure you're going to be surprised. Let's see. Santa Clara, Orange, LA, OC, Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin. I'm seeing a theme emerging here. San Diego, LA, Orange County, Alameda. Lots of good guesses. Multiple, here we go. LA, Alameda, Santa Clara, Tulare. Okay, you ready? So, top 5 counties with the most rural school districts in reverse order. I thought it would make this exciting. So, number 5 on the list, Fresno County. They have 16 rural districts in their county. Number 4 is actually a tie. Humboldt and Shasta both have 17. Number 3, Siskiyou has 20. Congratulations, Siskiyou. Number 2, whoever said Kern, you were close, 23. And number 1, Tulare County. We actually, in our county, in my county, 26 school districts. We have the most rural school districts in the state of California, in my county. So counties with no rural districts. Amador, that one's surprising. Del Norte, Orange County, San Francisco, Solano, and Yolo. So now I'm going to leave this up for a second and I'm going to let you think about this. A couple of those counties that are listed on the counties with no rural districts side are what we would normally consider to be rural counties. We think of several of those counties as being rural. Amador is a great example of that. Why is it listed here on this list? Think about it this way. The NCES definition, remember, it's about the distance to a larger city and a larger place. So Amador is really close to Sacramento. Sacramento is a big town. So it's not, the kids that go to school in Amador don't actually go to school in what's considered to be a rural district. So that is a rural county, but the kids don't go to a rural district. So it's really interesting when you start looking at these definitions. And it's important to know the difference because if you're applying for funding, if you're applying for grants, you need to know what exactly the requirements are, what the funder is looking for, so you can apply under the right headings. It's really interesting when you get into it. So I'm going to give you a second to just kind of ponder that, think about that. And if you have questions, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A. Because this is kind of, when I realized this, I thought it was kind of mind-blowing. I thought, wow, rural is rural, right? But it's actually not, depending on how you look at it. So back to us. So again, when you look at this, the idea here is that the data tells you more. From the outside, it can be deceiving. So just because Tulare County is so big, we have so much square mileage, we're the 7th largest geographically, our population's big, but 1 out of every 3 residents in our county lives in an unincorporated area. And again, we have, of our 43 school districts, 32 of those are small, 11 are large, and 26 of them are rural. So, you know, it's interesting when you look at this, things to consider. And there's just a fun little map for you of all of our districts. So my questions to you are, in your role, I want you to consider things. Whom do you serve? So whether you're at a county office, you're in an arts council, you're an arts organization, you're a state arts partner. I know we have a few of you on the phone tonight. Who do you serve? Which counties, which districts, which schools, which populations? How do you serve those people? So if you're in a community like Los Angeles, if you're LA based, think about, are you really serving all of the fringe areas? Are you serving your rural districts? Are you providing resources and support to them? If you are, that's awesome. But if you're not, what can you do to make sure that you're reaching everyone? Is your work equitable and accessible for all? And that's where this conversation starts to move, because if we're in what would geographically be census defined as a rural area where there may not be, you know, a university, or there may not be bookstores, or there may not be some of the infrastructure, big infrastructure that would exist in a bigger community, sometimes, you know, we're really under-resourced and man, we can't do this. We don't have the tools, we don't have the people, you know, that they have in the Bay Area or that they have in Southern California. But I'm going to challenge you to look around your community, and not just around your community, but around the state. So if you're in a small county, if you're in an Inyo, you know, if you're in an Imperial, if you're in a rural area, how can you start to build partnerships across the state? How can you make a network with someone who sees what you see and who has something to share with you? So consider that. So the other thing I want to talk about quickly is the $1 million question, literally, and the challenge to you. So one thing that happens a lot is funding. You know, it's the elephant in the room, which is why there's an elephant on this slide. We think about grants, we think about funding, and where those things often go frequently. You know, there's a lot of money that goes to the Bay Area, a lot of money that goes to Southern California, but rural counties and rural communities often aren't funded. You know, there's grants that don't always exist. So how can we start to encourage more people to bring funds, to provide funds, and to encourage growth in our rural areas? So my challenge to those of you who are in a position to provide funding and to provide grants is to consider funding rural areas. How can you start to look at this global perspective of school districts, of populations, and really consider the needs of everyone to make it accessible for all? So where do we start with all of this? It's great, it's interesting, rural, that's cool that there's a couple definitions, but if you really want to make a difference in your community, wherever you are, whatever your place is, whatever your role is, where do you start? Love this quote: start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, from the great Arthur Ashe. So think about stakeholders. Again, think about the people in your community. You know, I love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Who are the people in your community? Who are the people who have a stake in your enterprise, who have a stake in the game that you're trying to play, whether it's education, whether it's your community arts organization, you're a symphony, you're an orchestra, you're some, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, who are the people that have a stake in that? So I want you to take just a minute and brainstorm. Who are those people? And I like to say, who do you know, who owes you a favor, and who likes kids? Okay, who do you know, who owes you a favor, and who likes kids? Who are the people you can invite to the planning table? Start making a list, their name, their title, their organization. You know, if it's somebody who plays soccer with your daughter, you know, write their name down. If it's somebody that you know, see every once in a while, you know, you're in a fraternal organization with them, write their name down. If it's an uncle, cousin, family member, whoever it is, you can tap into that. So I'm going to stop talking and just give you a minute to start thinking, who are the people that you can connect with in your community? Give you about 10 more seconds to start making that list. And this is just a good brainstorm for you. You can keep thinking about this tonight, you know, tomorrow. Who do you know? Who can you invite to encourage to be part of your work, whatever the work is that you're doing, part of your mission? Because it starts with a conversation. So where do those connections fit? Let's say you have an uncle who works for law enforcement. You know, he would be really good. You know, he'd be a good person to bring in to work with your students. Maybe he's a musician and he plays the violin, and he can come in and teach students in your community, you know, sing a song. Where do those people fit in this network? We've created this sector map. It's 20 different sectors, and it's not the totality of all sectors that exist in a community, but there's 20 different areas to consider. And obviously education and arts are at the top, but when you start coming down the list, there are more sectors than you probably have thought of. So health and human services is a great place to look. For example, in our community, when we did our strategic arts plan, we reached out to our Health and Human Services Agency and our Suicide Prevention Task Force, because we have really high rates and a need for that service in our community. We had someone on our strategic planning team from day one, moment one, and they were really involved in the work. And because of that partnership and because of that relationship, now we've been able to continue growing our programs, and we have a lot more arts and mental health and social emotional learning infused into our schools, all because of that partnership. Business and industry is another great example. So if you have those second two go together, so if you have a workforce investment board, if you have an economic development corporation, jobs, I mean, every community, every company that's out there, you know, people need graphic designers. They have someone who can share, you know, how the arts impact their work and how creativity makes a difference in the economy, right? So if you can tap into these industries, if you can tap into the workforce, bring those people along and say, hey, can you help us? Can you come speak at our school? Can you come work with our arts org? Maybe they have grant opportunities. Maybe they have internship opportunities for students. I mean, that would be amazing. Tribal government, of course, that's a huge one. Fire, EMS, law enforcement, that's something we don't often think of. But again, they have needs and they have services and supports, you know, ways that we can infuse the arts into those places. Transportation, we have representatives from our local transportation council on our arts council, on our local arts council. And so it's kind of an interesting mix, because we're talking about transit in the town and you're thinking, well, how does that connect to the arts? It does, in the sense that if bus lines aren't available in our rural areas, how are people able to come to a museum, or how can they come to a concert? If they don't have access to busing, if they don't have access to these means of getting there, then there's always going to be a challenge, and it isn't really equitable. So how do we start having those conversations and addressing those needs? Again, media, sports, tourism, ag is huge in our rural areas, the environment. There's tons of places where you can tap into. So if you're looking for partners, if you're looking to make connections, think outside of the box. We often just think, well, it has to be education, or it has to be someone who's specifically in an arts organization that we work with. But that's not true. And in my experience, if you pick up the phone and call, as long as you say it's about the arts and there's kids involved, there's really rarely any time anyone's going to say no to that. People don't say no often when kids are involved. So keep that in mind. So this is in our alliance and our network, this is kind of the framework that we built and the way we started thinking about this. So we tapped into education, artists and arts orgs, again, health and wellness, creative economy and economic development, state and local government, and then folding in parents, students, and community stakeholders. So how do all of these areas come together? And where we started when we launched our strategic plan and we launched our community networks, our Arts Now community and our alliance, is we just mapped it out. So what organizations exist in each of these areas? Some of them are local organizations, some of them are regional organizations, and some of them are statewide partners. So like you'll see CCSESA is on this list. They're a statewide partner, but they impact our work, and the work that Sarah's done drives some of what we're doing. So I encourage you, think about this. So build a list similar to this and start plugging people in, but think outside of your local area. If you're in a small community, that's great. There is a lot of talent and a lot of passion in that small community, but can you broaden your scope? Can you broaden your frame a little bit? So if you are in a county where you have a neighboring larger county, then if your neighboring county is Santa Clara, call Santa Clara County and see if somebody wants to come across, come over to you. Because chances are some folks probably live in your county, pay taxes in your county, and they're residents in your county, and their children might go to school in your county, even though they work in the bigger city. So there is a shared interest. Consider that. So the one thing I would say is, with all of this, if you're scared, if you're not sure where to start, just ask. It's free to ask. It never hurts. The least someone's ever going to say is no, but you never know. They might say yes. They might say, yeah, I'll come aboard. I'll come help you. Whatever it is you need, I want to play. So again, module 21, I encourage you to check that out. It has, again, tons of resources. There's a whole section on rural and what makes rural. There's another section a big section on developing partnerships. There's some tools in there and some worksheets if you want to walk yourself through this process of actually identifying stakeholders. There's also a whole section on data. So there's some tools actually for going through the California Arts Ed Data Project and the California School Dashboard. So you can triangulate your data to look at how the arts fit in that. And then there's also the last section has all of the resources from our state partners. So that includes CCSESA, the California Alliance for Arts Education, Create California and California Arts Council, and California State PTA. So there's resources upon resources in there. And if you have other questions or you need other resources, I'm a resource for you myself. So please feel free to reach out at any time to me. So with that, I just want you to consider, bright ideas from this, things that this has triggered for you, and calls to action for yourself. Again, the challenge I have for you is consider your rural school districts and the rural areas within your county, and how can you leverage what you're already doing to be able to serve those areas better. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Peggy Burt.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm always so inspired by your strategic, systemic thinking. And it was such a great pleasure and honor to work with you on the strategic plan, which is a model for the state. The thing that Kate really highlighted and underlined for me is that we're working within a system. And oftentimes we try to make changes various places, but the way we think of collective impact, the way Create California is rolling out and connecting all of our statewide organizations, is that we have to look at the disruptions in the system, and we have to strategically, creatively, and with innovation come up with solutions. So it was my great pleasure this past year. Most of you know me. I am an arts education consultant. Currently, it's my joy to work under Sarah with the CCSESA Arts Initiative Rural Arts Network. And I really fell in love with the rural work as I had an opportunity to do some strategic planning throughout the state at county offices, and really learning what makes rural and special is community connection, looking out for each other, having each other's backs in a way that sometimes those of us that live in the urban areas, we don't have that experience where we know all of our neighbors and generations who have come before that family. So the thing that I love about working in the rural space is this deep sense of pride of place, this deep sense of connection through family, through faith, through community, that people really have each other's backs. And that keeps me wanting to continue to expand our greater understanding of what works in rural areas. This past year, the Rural County Arts Cohort, made up of 8 illustrious counties. It was Amador, Butte, Humboldt, Mono, Mariposa, Tulare, Imperial, Nevada. I think I got all of them. Yes, I think I got all of them. Allowed us to dig deeper through the wonderful support of the Stewart Foundation and the CCSESA Arts Initiative. We were able to support development of 3 strategic plans in Imperial County, Nevada County, and Mariposa County. We were also able to really learn more about some rigorous implementation strategies out of the county offices. Many of these were ongoing, sustainable, systemic approaches to professional development. And most of this work, of course, is before COVID, but our cohort ended up being together in the virtual space and sharing with each other what they had learned about building capacity of teachers and teaching artists, of arts organizations, of the districts within their county, working in ways to extend the reach of their county plan into the districts. And we have a wonderful resource now on the CCSESA website, which is the data profile for each of those 8 California rural counties who really extended the reach of what we know works in rural counties. So the link is there, and Adelaide is also dropping it into the chat. And I would highly recommend that you take some time to look at these beautiful profiles that each of these leads have created, because it really came to a point of feeling like we were being invited into their homes. And we talked about why they love where they live, what makes their place unique and special in the whole landscape of California. And you really will fall in love with these counties as you delve into their profiles. So this is the URL there, ccesaarts.org in rural arts. So that's the Rural County Arts Cohort, and that's on the CCSESA website. It is my great, great pleasure to move us into the part of our session today, which invites panelists, 4 leaders: Kiana Givens Jarvis from Imperial County, Deanna Fletcher from Humboldt County, Tim Taylor, who is with the Small School Districts Association and is the former superintendent of Butte County, and finally, Brian Buckley from Nevada County. All of these leaders have incredible background and experience of being part of the fabric of the rural community. And so I'm going to have a framing question for each one of the panelists, and then give them free rein to talk about what's really on their heart as they work in rural areas. And we're going to give you 2 to 3 minutes of reflection time after each person speaks. Sometimes I know in webinars, we have so much information that is being thrown at us, and we don't really have a chance to be mindful and process that information or even to take a breath. So after each one of our leaders share, you'll have just a couple of minutes to jot down notes, put things in the chat if you have questions, or for me, most importantly, what was sparked in you when you heard the story that was told by one of our leaders? So I'm going to invite the wonderful Kiana Gibbons Jarvis to share. It was my great pleasure to get to know Kiana through the Rural County Arts cohort. And she is a treasure in our ecosystem. So Kiana, over to you.
Peggy, thank you so much. Are you going to pose that question or?
I am. Thank you for the prompt. My question for, I know, we rehearsed it so much, I forgot I had to ask the question. So I'm going to ask Kiana about, you heard Sarah mention that strategic planning is really a game changer in the rural areas. How has the strategic planning process and implementation played out for you in Imperial County? What are you seeing as a result? What are the changes that you're seeing? And if you'd like to touch on SEL, I know that's something that you're really passionate about.
It is. And hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to get to share my story with you all and the story of our county. Rarely do I read, but I wrote it down because I have just a moment in time to kind of capture this wonderful experience. I would say that tending to social and emotional aspects when bringing the stakeholders together, that was the main strategy for creating the process that was fulfilling and instructive and inspirational. It has all been about relationships and connections in our story here at Imperial County. Though I've worked for the Imperial County Office of Education for more than 12 years, arts education was new on my plate. As often is the case at rural county offices, the resources don't often allow for a dedicated specialist in each and every content area. The support from CCSESA for the creation of a strategic arts plan was right on time for me and where my work was. We were provided with a planning coach to guide our stakeholder group through the planning process. Leveraging existing relationships was my main recruiting strategy. And all I could tell them was, I just need you to bring your good attitude and your ideas to help more kids have access to the arts. Because I didn't really know what to expect coming in new to this role. Our amazing strategic planning coach, Jim Thomas, used his masterful facilitation skills to build trust with this group of strangers immediately. The 7 norms of collaboration became our anchor for how we communicated as we shared our various perspectives and experiences about the arts. Jim also helped everyone understand that county offices are there to offer guidance and invite districts and schools to participate. This helped to broaden our group's focus and make responsible decisions for our kids rather than just my kids. We finished our strategic plan in February and we're fully prepared to roll it out at our arts convening in Sacramento when the pandemic sent everyone home. Peggy and the Rural Arts crew convened virtually anyway, and their support for our rural county has not stopped yet. Because of relationships forged through this strategic planning process, the launch of the Rural Arts Network is expanding to have more COEs be able to participate. As the work with Jim finished up, we were connected almost immediately with Adelaide and the California Alliance for Arts Education, and now we have become partners. But through the support of the Alliance, our strategic planning team will now roll over and become our Arts Advisory Committee as we shape and mold the plan to fit this moment in time. We've partnered with Louisa Higgins from Riverside COE to bring elementary professional development to Imperial County teachers. Our Region 9, and that's Orange County, San Diego County, and Imperial County, We've rekindled our relationship, and as a result, we are, planning to roll out to superintendents together. The arts ecosystem in California can be a complex system to navigate, but with Kate's help and CCSESA and the Alliance help, our county has had a guided tour of how they're all connected. And I think the most impressive thing is the collaborative nature with which all of these organizations work together, with students and equitable access to the arts as a common and unifying factor. So to close, the product was the reason for our stakeholders to come together, that strategic plan, and our social and emotional connection through the process is what will keep us and our new friends coming back for more. Thank you for letting me expand on our story.
Oh, Kiana, that was wonderful. You have been swept up in this network, this web of our interconnections. And I'm so, so glad that you are. And you've availed yourself of this interconnected web.
I don't know how it would have ever happened if I would have had to get on a plane and fly to each of you for your expertise. So this moment is incredibly challenging. It has, when you're looking for the bright spots, Zoom is a challenge, but, I've made all of these new connections through this. This is, I'm sure, how internet dating works.
Exactly. I love that. Well, I'm going to ask Kate to put up our reflection slide, and I'm going to give you just a minute or two to think about what Kiana's bright light shone for you. When she talked about each one of those strategies, and I love how she wrapped, we're talking so much these days about social emotional learning for adults and the social emotional connections of their planning team that will continue on forward. What did she spark in your mind? What stood out? Where were you inspired? And what of those strategies that she named could you apply right away? Go ahead. All right, go ahead and finish up what you're writing. Feel free to put a pin in that and go back to it. I think it's just nice to be able to write the highlights so you don't forget after hearing each one of the panelists. It's my great honor to introduce and recognize Deanna Fletcher, working in the Humboldt County area. And the question I would like to frame for you, Deanna, is what challenges and opportunities are you currently seeing in different cultural contexts? And what are you seeing as ways to address inequities, especially around language and access in rural areas? I know that this is one of your areas of deep understanding. If you would share with us.
Thank you, Peggy. Hello, everyone. I am originally from New York by way of Delaware, by way of Maryland. And I came here as a theater practitioner and ended up back working in arts education, which I was doing in Baltimore, Maryland. And one of the things that I fell in love with here were the invisible. I am a Black woman at those two intersections, and as I delve into Humboldt County's statistics, I learned that there is a 2% population of Black students here, of Black people here. And that is not an updated statistic, but it's still very low. And then I started to delve into the other marginalized and disenfranchised bodies here. There is a 83% white identifying only population here. So that'll tell you about the rest. And so in arts education, I believe that it's something that will strengthen the education of disenfranchised and marginalized groups of people, particularly BIPOC students. And we have to kind of go back a little bit in history to understand where we are now in this pandemic, living this digital experience. So Humboldt County face the rural challenges that Kate Stover so lovely laid out so well. And rural, I also believe we have rural remote counties here. And there are many different cultures here, and the Indigenous people here are very present, and we honor them regularly. And that's something that I also have strengthened in my practice as well. So when we look at history, there was already the social economic disparity of serving the invisible, which is what I'm identifying as our BIPOC people. And so now we're in a place where we're home, we're digital. How can we make sure that those disenfranchised, marginalized group of BIPOC people are being seen on the computer? Challenges, we can't. Why? Because we're remote. We can't get some of the devices home. We can't even get the devices. We can't get the funding. So all of these challenges are mounting up. And we're looking at digital equity, but before we get to digital equity, let's look at family culture and the disruption we're causing by making families, because there are a lot of families that I work with who choose to intentionally practice not having technology at home. And there's this one mother who I particularly always think of who was upset before the pandemic about a school sending digital homework home. So now we're in the pandemic and I think of this mother all the time. So we're disrupting her family culture. So there's that. And so now we also want to look at how do we dismantle these digital inequities? How do we, again, like Kate said, lean on our community? How do you use your privilege of access to people that others don't have to insert them into the community and to help? And how can families and students focus on arts education if we are still facing social economic disparities? So one of the strategies we've been using is leaning on our cultural organizations to insert their work into the schools. Eureka NAACP has a farming project here that is serving 2 to 3 schools. Black Humboldt, which is an organization that I co-founded, we're serving students with backpack kits, back to school kits, and they don't have digital devices in them, but they will at least propel students to continue their education. And a lot of people have volunteered to deliver those supplies according to our state mandated safety protocols. And I also have partnered with principals to they are now co-coaching. They have a cohort that they're strengthening or developing new cohorts. So I've been introducing principals to one another. They've been meeting and joining into each other's schools, sharing strategies between teachers being invited into other classrooms to model for other teachers or to observe. So those are some of the strategies we're using. One of the things that Peggy and I discussed previously is that there are a lot of heartfelt thought partnership that's taking place. And that is not necessarily around strategy. It's around how can we think outside of the status quo? How can we, despite the systemic problems that we're facing, help each other to have Zoom or Google Classroom management, cue cards. How can we get students to be creative and use the things in their home to play dress up and role play and critically think about how their costume pieces create a character in history and time, or a new character, to be innovative, because those innovations lead to us ultimately being able to speak to each other in society, and no matter what role you take on, And one of the other things that I also like to point out is the data in rural areas, and particularly Humboldt County, is not fully available and accurate yet. And I know that it's a bigger systemic problem, and I hope that we can get there, but we need to be able to codify how much schools are able to receive arts instruction, arts education, and whichever medium of arts, because we're not there yet. And so we're still in this place of communal gathering. And that is a beautiful thing. And I think that's what I love about Humboldt. As much as I wanted to leave, I was ready to run to San Francisco, I will tell you all. But I've grown such a love for this place and for the people, the stewards of this land. I've spent a week outside on Wiyot tribal land with their permission, and have grown to love this place. And I recognize that as much as we operate in a systemic structure, and someone who is a product of inner city schools, that I find beauty in community. And I hope that we can start as a nation, lean on each other more and less on high, and have our influence our higher power structures to transform, and also have a communal mindset. So that is my piece, and thank you for listening.
So inspired by you, and your love for that community is so visceral, and your energy. They are so fortunate to have you there and part of the fabric of that community. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to put up the reflection slide for a minute. Capture some of that beautiful lightning that was sparked by Deanna's comments. I especially was taken by this idea of principals leaning in with other principals more through the digital means, and teachers modeling for teachers, observing, giving each other feedback, maybe in a different way than when we were in real life. Really interesting strategies and an understanding of the bigger picture. Feel free to put anything in the chat if you want to share it more broadly. I think you touched a lot of hearts with naming the invisibles. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my honor to present the wonderful Tim Taylor, who is with the Small School Districts Association and formerly the Superintendent of Schools in Butte County. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thank you. And I want to start out, Deanna, thank you for a Black woman to do that work in a rural community. It's really, really courageous and shows incredible leadership, and anything we can do to help, let us know. That was powerful. I knew following you would be tough, okay? So I'll do my best. But hey, listen, I want to thank all of you out there for your leadership. The word leadership to me drives everything I do, and I encourage all of you to continue to work on that skill because most of you are funded probably off a grant that has a lot of management stuff you got to do, but leadership drives great advocates, great change makers. You listen to Dion, she's a leader, she's a natural, but you got to work on that. You got to keep that going. I work on it every week, following some people. So I want to talk about 5 or 6 things in my 5-minute little window here. First, I want us to all imagine a world without the arts, without music, without live concerts, without dance. And that's what we have today. You know, people are asking me, why is our mental health issue so intense right now with kids and all that? And the combination of COVID and the 112 districts that dealt with wildfires this year has led to a real absence of the feel and the passion of the arts. I'm dying. I go to so many concerts, you guys. I go to live shows. I love art museums. And I can tell that I'm not myself because I've had that pull from my life. I can't imagine what kids are doing without it or having much access to it as we're in this new COVID world. And so we have to realize that. And rurals, you guys know, you have the highest adverse childhood experience rates, way higher than large urban. You throw in the wildfires, the unemployment, the drugs that they're dealing with out in the rural communities, and it's really a disproportionate rate that your children are facing. And I'm here to tell you, the arts is the best therapy there is. When we had the campfire, 5,000 kids lost their home. We used the arts for the children to express their pain, right? We know we need mental health counselors, but we truly need the arts, which to me is a longer cure than sitting across the table from some strange school psychologist talking about your feelings or how you're doing. And I think the combination of that, with the hundreds of millions of dollars coming in for mental health, we have to, and you have to, talk to the decision makers about utilizing the arts to help cure our kids and help our teachers. It's so therapeutic. I saw it in action after the greatest fire tragedy in California history up in Paradise. And it truly, getting these kids into a combined choir with hundreds of kids singing about that moment cured not only those kids, but all the kids they sang to. Couple other things I want to give you some advice on, because we don't need to talk about how great of advocates you are, but utilize youth voices to help you drive your agenda, right? Foster Youth does this better than anybody. The Foster Youth Association downtown, the legislation is driven by the youth. They are the voice. They talk. They are doing it. Mental Health Commission now is using 11 kids to help drive their decision making. We need to utilize the youth to get into the decision makers of your community and your districts. Get them at those LCAP meetings. Let the youth do the talking because they know how value it is to them. I also think it's very important. I love to see Jennifer Spangler on here from Chico State. I grabbed her the second I heard she was doing work at Chico State University in this area, and she started working for our county office. Use the post-secondary students to come in and be ambassadors of the arts for kids. That's your art docents, is use the kids. The Migrant Ed program, the Mini Corps, it's called the Mini Corps, California Mini Corps, has been around 53 years. Migrant kids in college, tutoring and mentoring migrant kids in schools is one of the best models ever. We implemented that in a foster youth program. Why don't we have more of an arts core program where older kids are helping the youngers and they are the teachers and ambassadors of the art? Your county superintendent needs to get reelected. All right, Kate, so we know CC needs to get reelected, and she will. Or not CC, I'm sorry, you're Tulare, that's Madera. I felt that supporting the arts was so valuable for my next term, because art people vote, right? So if you're doing things, I'd sit down with your county superintendent, tell them put their money where their mouth is, and put on art shows, put on things that support the arts, because that is an important role of the county office. There's some great stuff going on statewide, but your county soup should be fiscally and I would say full-heartedly supporting the arts. It's what the county office is built for, to help you out. Push them, and if you need help from me talking to them, I would be more than happy to do that. Two other quick things, and we heard this from Kiana, partner with a quality large county office or district. They have so much resources and money. Don't be fearful of them. Bring them in, copyright their stuff, do what they do. They will love you. They love going to small rurals because everybody's nice, right? The big districts, and counties, they have to deal with a lot of crap. They get out to Little Imperial. I bet they love that little journey. And then lastly, you guys, I'm a person who's more of a ready, fire, aim person. Quit planning, get things done, shoot, fire, and then adjust, right? If you wait too long and have too many committee meetings, time passes, get things done and do whatever it takes. And I'll leave with this. I had a rural person call me a couple weeks ago and she goes, everything's about football in this town. I said, well, then have your art program do artwork of the football team and put it on the brochure. And if you want to get money, that board will see you're doing things for the football team. So she's starting to do that. She's going to have an art show based on the football team because that's what happens in a rural community in Kentucky. So I say do whatever it takes to get your message through. And again, I really am humbled to be on this panel and to listen to all the great speakers. And thanks so much, Peggy, for inviting me today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for your leadership and for talking about leadership at every level, including our youth voice and including partnering across county lines. Thank you so, so much. Let's go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'd be remiss to tell people, if you need anything to support, email me. We have the largest association in the United States here in California, and we're here to help. And just please send me an email or text and I'll help you out.
Thank you, Tim. That is generous indeed. So, so appreciated. Let's go ahead and do a quick reflection of what you heard from the dynamic leadership. Each one of these speakers, as you can tell, is leading from their heart in such a profound way. I often see that with leaders that I admire. Thank you. Where were you inspired? All right, let's go ahead and move on to Brian. And I've asked Brian to tell us a little bit about his work with partnerships. Kate has given us a wonderful frame of thinking about how we can strategically partner and leverage our success through partnerships. So I want to invite Brian to talk about his story. Brian Buckley is from Nevada County.
Right. Well, thank you, Peggy. And as has been said and shared by all the panelists, it really is an honor to be part of this group and be with all these passionate champions of healthy youth and healthy communities and building those things through the arts. For me, I'm a very obviously retired administrator, school administrator. And for the last more than a decade, I've been part of the Arts Council. In fact, I started with the Arts Council while I was still working as an administrator, but kept up in retirement because everyone needs a hobby in retirement, right? So I would like to say that, yes, I think we have a lot of very healthy, good collaboration relationships in Nevada County. And I think they're very reproducible. I think obviously there's some individual context, but I think they could be reproduced many places and are being reproduced many places. Like to set the stage a little bit. All of these relationships, it's a years-long process, trial and error. There's failure, but the practice of art teaches us that failure is just part of the process on the road to success. So starting several years ago, with the help of the Alliance, we had a stakeholder meeting, And from that, we formed an arts education leadership group. It included the county superintendent, district superintendents, arts organization, EDs, and members of the community. And to be blunt, nothing came of it, and the group disbanded. But we learned from that. And what did we learn? Well, we learned what everybody knows. Educational leaders are very busy generalists, and sometimes the most they can honestly give is verbal support and a green light. Their staffs are all busy, and it's likely that somebody else is going to have to step up and create concrete actions. The second thing that we learned is that you need to assume that you're going to have to educate people about the value of the arts and the value of an arts organization, in our case, the Nevada County Arts Council. We had to become a solution partner with county schools, and not just a giver of great ideas and wish lists. So as one person put it, we need to instead of asking students or asking schools to save their art programs, we need to be talking about how art programs can save the schools. So the first thing we did is we began providing programming directly to schools through CAC grants, such as Artists in the Schools, Youth Arts Action, Jumpstarts, as well as other programs. One exciting example of which is the Dream of Difference program. That's a poetry sharing project connecting students in small isolated areas in Jordan, Palestine, Malaysia, Zimbabwe, the UK, and now the US. Second, we did a State of the Arts report that reviewed the arts opportunities and practices in all the public, including charter schools, under the umbrella of the County Office of Education. The study was shared with education, arts, and community stakeholders. And third, we offered grant writing assistance to the county office, and we also shared any professional development opportunities that we became aware of so that they could share it with staff as well. We also provided trainers and workshops to the county office when they were doing professional development days. Finally, we actually helped with organizing and providing programming to the Nevada County STEAM Expo, a program envisioned by the superintendent of schools as a combination science fair, math and robotics competition, along with art exhibitions and demonstrations. In fact, the highest honor for a participant in that, student participant in that event, is the Da Vinci Award, which is given to the most creative, rigorous, and well-presented project. The STEAM Expo has really become a very popular event, attended by over thousands of people at the fairgrounds every year, at least up until COVID. 2 years ago, the new county superintendent, Scott Lay, reached out to the Arts Council for assistance in applying for a grant to develop a countywide strategic plan for arts education, something we're all very familiar with in this group. As you might imagine, that recently completed State of the Arts report was very helpful in applying for that grant. And once we began the process, the Arts Council was a major player in creating the stakeholder group that helped put the plan together. I have to note too that the county office has been a great shepherd of the process and is very interested in making sure it's not just another plan gathering dust on the shelf. And finally, as a prelude to one of the more innovative partnerships with the county office, our county office readily admits that the position of the arts coordinator or arts lead for their office is severely underfunded, very part-time. And rather than merely point out that fact and complain about it, the Arts Council has really partnered up with the county office, and we've begun a partnership that I'm not sure exists anywhere else to add hours to that person, the arts lead in the county office. The Arts Council contracts additional hours from that person to administer some of the grant programs operated by the Arts Council, such as Artists in the Schools and Youth Arts Action. Kim Ewing is the name of the arts coordinator, and we also partnered with the county office to write an arts integration training grant. And Kim is an essential key element to that, and she's engaged in providing arts integration training for teachers throughout Nevada County. Overall, it's a systematic and synergistic win-win situation because there's such a tremendous overlap of the goals and vision of both organizations. We still have a long way to go. The arts coordinator position is is still very part-time, and COVID has changed things so drastically that we've had to pivot and reorganize almost every program. For example, with the artists in the schools, we've gone virtual, and the teaching artists have produced teaching videos that actually the county office again partnered with us and contributed matching funds to allow these videos to be shown to used by teachers throughout Nevada County. And with one click, they can have these art lessons on a weekly basis that they can either do with their students online or through an at-home, distance learning packet. So despite the fact that we're not there yet, it's a work in progress. The synergy of mutual support between the County Office of Education and the Arts Council is really solid, and it feels like we're headed in the right direction, regardless of how far we still have to go.
Brian, thank you so much. There's so many pieces of what you just spoke of, but the grant writing piece is something that I want to highlight, because having that grant writing expertise and having those shared hours, that's a game changer. That absolutely opens doors that would otherwise not be available. So really collaborating in such a mutually supportive way. Mm-hmm. In the interest of time, thank you so much to all of my panelists. Kiana, Deanna, Tim, Brian, thank you so much for bringing your varied perspectives. I've so enjoyed getting to know you better and hearing your stories. And thank you for sharing all of those stories with our group today. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Adelaide and to Sarah.
Yes, I just want to definitely echo Peggy's thank you to all of you. We do have a couple of questions. Let's see if we can get through them. The first is, when speaking to new stakeholders and trying to get them invested in arts and arts education, do you need to change your message or pitch for each of the stakeholders?
Who would like to take that one? Tim.
I'll hand it to Brian. We talked about this last night. Go ahead, Brian.
The short answer is yes, it helps, but the message is the same. I think different people approach arts education from a different perspective. So you have to understand where their interests are. Tim's example was perfect with the football team and the values of that local community.
Yeah. Right on.
Can I add something to that, Peggy, really quick?
Certainly.
I would say one way to start that conversation is to not even start with the ask, not start with education and not start with that piece. Just ask them if they participate in currently or ever have done the arts, and get them to think about, if they were 7 playing the violin or the flute or the clarinet, or they were in a tap class, or they were whatever their experiences are, and then swoop in with, isn't this what you want for your community, for your students, for yourself? Get them there and then shift them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just would add that I found that the more you can build those deep relationships first, that goes a long way as you move forward together.
Adelaide, do we have another?
Thank you all. Yes, this is a specific Module 21 question for you, Kate. Okay. So do the strategies work for tiny rural and remote districts as well as for more expansive rural areas? Do you need to tailor the strategies for your community size?
No, they work. Yes, they work for everyone. No, you don't need to tailor them. The tailoring comes in your ability to do the work. So if it's a matter of finding stakeholders, finding partners, your community best. You know your neighborhood the best. So that's where the tailoring happens. So I could say, yeah, I'm going to reach out to my symphony, but my symphony isn't your symphony. So if you find yourself in that work, find yourself in the space, it should work for you. And if it doesn't, and if you get in the module and you see something that needs to be added, reach out and let me know, because I'd love to help you work through that.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm now going to ask our graphic facilitator, Tracy, to share her screen so we can all get a good look at what she has created during our conversation, and then send things over back to you, Sarah, to close us out.
All right, oops, 1 second. I had an issue earlier, but it's coming back. Okay, there we go. I'm going to screen share.
Thank you, Tracy.
Wow.
Wow. We covered a lot of ground.
And remember, this is just
That's
a draft.
amazing.
I'll be finalizing it and sending it over in a couple days. So no screenshots, please.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Tracy.
Super
Wow.
There we
nice.
are. There we all are.
I love
So-
the footsteps.
As we reflect on just our time together, if you could just put either a reflection, aha, or one takeaway today, we'd really appreciate it. We're just so grateful that you could spend time with us. And we know this is a complex issue and we have a lot still to learn from one another, but we thank all the presenters and the panelists and everyone that helped us organize this. We've really benefited from this time together. We thank you. So we'll just wrap up with a few reflections in the chat, and then we'll send you on your way. It's you're probably getting hungry or needing to move on. So thanks again, and we'll leave you with just the reflections in the chat room.
Kate has a contact slide that she'd like to put up if we can move to that one for our final.
Great.
I can't share while someone else is sharing.
So if
Tracy, would you mind, yeah, just pulling this down? And just so everyone knows, we will be sending around Tracy's completed work, so everyone will have a chance to see it again.
There's a lot of rich information in the chat. Please feel free to take a look at that before you sign off. These are all of our emails and contact. And as you heard from the panelists, everyone is very accessible and open to sharing and collaboration. So please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us if you'd like more information about what we talked about today or to get involved in other ways.